The actual question that arises, unrelated to Mormonism, is what's the point? Because there's a lot of theories around the universe right now about what all of this is. Is that Taylor fighting for her life to get on Real Housewives of Salt Lake City? Fighting for her life to get on that show.
Could be.
Is it all for a reality show? Did she turn into Kris Jenner and her whole goal is just to land them all a TV show where all of this, because people are invested now. They want to know, like, who are the Mormon swingers and what are they doing?
How's it going, everyone? It's your favorite apostates. I'm McKay.
I am Jordan.
Did you forget?
Yes.
Okay, that's fair. And we're back at it with another one, a very highly requested one.
The highest, is that a word? Requested topic that we have had in a hot minute. And so you ask, we delivered. The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
Yeah, pop culture mixed with Mormonism. I mean,
it's our bread and butter, baby.
It's right up our alley.
As ex-Mormons, if you're new here, people who got married in the temple and participated in the religion for the majority of our lives before leaving a few short years ago and suffering all the repercussions that come with that when you leave a high-demand religion. Today's video is sponsored by Aura, and it's a really important time to be talking about them because hackers may have stolen the social security numbers of every American. So that's not good.
Recently, over 2.9 billion records were stolen from national public data, and those are records that are used by PIs and staffing agencies and other people who do background checks, so this is a very serious issue.
If you weren't taking precautions with your personal information before, this should be a huge wake-up call for you. You've never been more vulnerable online than you are right this moment, but we personally are not stressed about it because we use Aura.
Aura is great because it monitors your personal data, including your social security number, which may have been stolen recently, across billions of data points like the dark web and public court records to detect and alert you in real time when they find it to potential identity theft.
They also give you up to $5 million in identity theft insurance should the worst case scenario happen to you. And they have a bunch of other safety features online and all inside their one app, so everything is nice and easy for you to use.
We love a very easy to use app. It's always the most convenient. Obviously, we know that we are an international channel, but a large segment of our audience is American and you have social security number. So now's the time to click the link down in the description down below. We also have it on screen. So you can go to aura.com/Jordan and McKay to get a 14-day free trial for Aura and see what it's all about and see if it is something that is going to work for you.
That'll be enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal information is on there. And we highly recommend that you do this right now because national public data isn't going to do anything to help you at this point, and they're probably not even going to face any repercussions for this massive issue.
Again, go and check out the link, aura.com/Jordan and McKay to get your 2-week free trial. And thanks again to Aura for sponsoring this video.
We have thrice purposes for you today. I have thrice purposes for the video that we're talking about. Sorry, we're watching Schitt's Creek and thrice is in my head. So we're going to be talking about a few things that are mom talk related. So if you don't have any interest in watching The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, which is a new reality TV show, it's #1 on Hulu right now. If you have no interest in that and you want the lowdown on the situation, this video is for you. If you want a deeper understanding of the Mormon themes that are present and the perspectives of the ex-Mormons who can see things that the average non-Mormon may not, this video is for you. And if you'd like a little primer about who these women are before going into watching the episodes, you can watch the first part of this video and then dip out before we talk about spoilers.
There you go.
Our goal for the first part of this is to be spoiler free. We'll give you heads up. So if you want to watch this on your own, you can find it on Hulu, or you can join our watch parties that we're doing every Friday. We're halfway through the series right now. This upcoming Friday, we'll be watching episodes 5 and 6, which are the Vegas episodes, which we're very excited to watch.
Yeah.
So we both have watched the entire series, but we are also watching it with our patrons and members. So if that is of interest to you, you can join the Patreon or click the join button below this video. And I also put a question box on my Instagram and asked you the questions that you guys have about Secret Lives of Mormon Wives as you've been watching it. And so we will include some of those questions at the end of this video as well.
So in this video, we're going to mainly focus on the events and the publicity surrounding the TV show. But the genesis of all of this, we've already spoken on way back.
When it was happening.
We actually included a clip from this at the beginning. So you know that we've been kind of keeping our eyes on this for a long time at this point. But if you would like more context on mom talk and the whole swinging scandal and everything that was going on with that, you can go and click this link up in the corner, and that will take you to the past video that we did
on the swinging context.
Yeah. Everything that we knew leading up to this, we kind of figured that there was going to be a reality show surrounding mom talk.
I had the vibe.
And yeah, Jordan nailed it, really. And, everything like that. And then on August 14th, just a month exactly from the day that we're filming this, Hulu dropped a trailer for The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. A very salacious trailer.
Salacious.
It was very grabby, set to the tune of Sam Smith, the one, I can't even remember the title of the song, but you know the one that got everybody's tail feathers ruffled.
Unholy, isn't it?
Unholy, yeah.
Yes.
That dropped, and it sent the Mormon community into a tizzy, to say the least.
Oh my heavens. And let's be clear, something that I find woefully ironic, I will say, at this point, is that the Mormon Church made a response to this upcoming reality show that hadn't premiered yet, and were much more vocal, and the members were absolutely losing their minds, not all members, but a lot of them, over this. But when Mormon people, murder other people, or when Mormon people, go to jail for child abuse or things, radio silence. Church doesn't say shit. But when it comes to a reality show that might make them look a little bit bad, they're like, we got to do something about this.
And I think they were talking, they made that statement after this trailer came out.
We need to include that.
I'll throw it up on the screen if you want to look at it. Sorry, people who are listening.
They were very vague about it.
They were pretty vague. There's also that Hugh Grant kind of thriller horror movie that's
about sister missionaries that they were also addressing at the time.
Yeah.
So they kind of wrapped it all into one, but we're basically this isn't accurate to the Mormon lifestyle. And
I will yield that the trailer was very, it's a trailer. It's supposed to be grabby. It's supposed to rile up interest or garner interest in the show and everything like that. So yes, they edit the hell out of it and make it seem very salacious. And, there's a lot of salacious stuff in the show, but, a
little dramatic.
Yeah.
Mormon Church, are we?
Just to paint a picture, let's see some of the responses that people have made regarding after the trailer was released.
Why are we making a TV show called The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives? This is the Mom Talk group, and they were participating in soft swinging, which is almost going all the way, but not.
I have never seen someone so open about not living those standards that the church espouses and still called themselves LDS.
It's just interesting that they're promoting that life, because it's it just rubs us wrong.
Is it okay for the people that are on wide ends of this spectrum to be representing the wives in that church?
Oh, no.
Corny.
Okay, there are two things about this video that threw me for a loop. One, as I went to high school with one of these girls.
No, even better, her brother was a good friend of mine through most of my
And I had classes with her brother, and we were in the same ward growing up. So number one, that's what threw me off first about this video. But none of this surprises me.
No.
None at all, really.
We'll just go on with it before we make really any analysis.
I ain't never been humiliated and embarrassed like that in my whole entire life. Thanks to you.
Thanks to me?
Yeah, thanks to you.
This one was crazy because there is so much to be embarrassed by when you are a Mormon, especially regarding church history and stuff like that, that you are just by association
polygamy,
tasked with defending.
Garments,
Yeah.
Not being able to drink coffee, having to explain that, the soda thing.
The racism.
Like, culturally, there's just so much here that you could be embarrassed by. So it's hilarious to me that this is what she's choosing to be embarrassed by. Also to say, Satan really is getting desperate to tear us down. Yeah, Satan directed this documentary. He was at the helm. He was like, let's go, bitches.
Yeah, I was the director, apparently.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
There we go.
Okay, this last one sent me for a loop because this guy relates it back to the Book of Mormon.
The Book of Mormon predicted this behavior in Helaman chapter 1. In verse 11, it talks about a group of Nephites that swore by their everlasting Maker to tell no man, to keep secret the ungodly things that they were doing. What's interesting is they believe in God enough to swear by him. Meaning these aren't atheists. These are people that understand the gospel that are not living the gospel. And in verse 12, it tells us that these people are among us. It tells us that these people mingle themselves among the people in a manner by which they cannot be found. Meaning they blend in. But just because you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints does not mean that you are living the gospel of Jesus Christ.
So this guy is relating, if I might have had to cut this one, I'm not sure yet. But this guy is relating these ladies on this reality TV show, which some of the things that get me about all of these responses is it's a reality TV show. And when has reality TV ever been an accurate depiction of reality? Like, let's just use a little bit of critical thinking to start. But this guy is comparing what these ladies are doing on this show to guys in the Book of Mormon who conspired to never reveal that one of their own murdered somebody. And they're swearing by the name of God to do so, which they do nothing of the sort. So this is already a reach.
I mean, that's like bonkers.
But I can't believe that we're going so far. This reach is going very far. I don't know.
That has
why.
13,000 likes on it too.
Yeah. And then there was also an article in Deseret News, which is a news outlet that's owned by the church. So obviously they're going to be very partial to the Mormon church, right? Written by a Hannah Syriac who has had some interesting opinions in the past. So take that with as you will. But in her article, she included some quotes from other people that she interviewed regarding their opinions on the show that at this point had just been released that day, but they hadn't seen any of it.
We're glorifying something that we know is bad for women, said Bauman. When women leave faith, it leads to greater depression. It leads to greater loneliness. It leads to all of these horrible outcomes, which as a therapist in Utah, I'm going to unequivocally disagree with all of those statements. That may be true for some people, but that is not true for all people, especially the people who I've seen who psychologically could not stay within the confines of the church and do the things that the church expected, because those things were causing depression and loneliness and other horrible outcomes that I don't even have time today to name. And so this is just kind of bullshit to me, because we're kind of painting with a broad brush and saying that it's depressing. And sure, some people don't want to leave the faith and they go through periods of depression and things, and that's understandable because it's a hard thing to do. But to say that what these women are doing is leading to greater depression and greater loneliness is bullshit. Like, this is horrible, horrible journalism in my opinion.
You don't even know exactly what's going on.
No, you don't. Like, they're just saying if you leave faith, it leads to depression by like generalized probably statistics. Who knows if they're even looking at the Mormon population specifically. But as somebody who works with this population every fucking day, I can tell you that that is not the case. So like, this is not what's happening. It might be happening for some people, but for some people, in order to manage this depression and loneliness, the best thing that they do is leave.
Sorry, Jordan, but your anecdotes do not trump this person's feelings.
Me as a professional with a fucking master's degree, what do I know working with this population? What do I know? The show, premiering Friday, is not an isolated example, she said, speaking about other portrayals of religious women like Unorthodox, which received criticisms from Jewish communities. She said the gist of what is shown on screen is that these women don't need organized religion and they are feeling restrained by faith, and that the roles and obligations suggested by their faiths harming them and stopping them from fulfilling their dreams. Okay, first of all, this article came out, correct me if I'm wrong, before the show came out, right?
It came out the same day.
Okay.
So this was this was received before the show came out.
Now, that might be the case for some of the women. Some of the women might feel like the ex-Mormon, particular women who were on the show who felt restrained by Mormonism and felt like Mormonism was harming them. This might apply to them, who are the minority. But for the other majority who are in the church and going and participating members, just not the way that you guys like, wouldn't agree with this. So, like, cafeteria Mormon style over here.
That's kind of a they call people like these ladies on the show cafeteria Mormons, but they're going to be cafeteria critics in picking and choosing things that are not even necessarily the truth.
Absolutely. The show is a classic example, among others, of misrepresenting religion and people of faith for entertainment purposes, and in reality, that is not what people actually want. Angela Redding, executive director of the Radiant Foundation of Deseret Management Corp., which is owned by the church. So, of course, she's going to say that. It's what she's being paid to say. But I will say something, and we're going to get to this momentarily, but I have never seen, of all the things I've watched, aside from, like, Mormon films, or, like, films produced by Mormonism, like cheesy ones that we've watched before, I have never seen anything else that so accurately depicts Mormon culture. I will say that. And nothing inaccurate. Yeah. Not a single inaccurate thing about Mormonism was spoken.
So uncritical of Mormonism faith principles. Very uncritical, in my opinion. So there's a wealth of things that you could glean from everything that was being said about the show before it came out. There was a lot of people sharing their opinions. These were just a couple that I liked. All over social media.
All the people inclined to use Facebook or sharing posts about, you know, these women aren't actually Mormon. Blah, 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 blah.
There were a lot of people who were very, very triggered, who were offended by how anybody could have the audacity to put out such awful propaganda against the church and calling it anti-Mormon material and stuff.
An interesting thing, because a lot of the discourse right now is that this show is misrepresenting Mormonism. But, like, we've been covering Mormon influencers for years now, and we always talk about how Mormon influencers are often really great at misrepresenting Mormonism. I don't think necessarily they misrepresent themselves, but Mormonism, because they create a Mormonism that works for them, which by and large isn't the actual way Mormonism is, right? But it's interesting because there's plenty of influencers like that, but I haven't heard
nearly as much criticism from
from Mormons about those people that we've talked about, like the Jordan Pages, like the very well-received Mormon women influencers. But when it comes to these girls,
it's because they're consuming alcohol and allegedly swinging and all of that stuff. And yeah, that stuff is more outwardly to a lot of people who have what you would call very strict and strong morals, more outrageous than, oh, here is Hannah of Ballerina Farms, and she doesn't really wear the garment all the time like she's been instructed to do when she entered the temple. That kind of stuff. You know? So anyway, let's get into the thick of it, starting out by introducing who these people are, who our players are, really quick. There are a couple people who were in the Mom Talk scene prior.
Miranda and Camille.
In the
primarily
whole scandal situation, who didn't make it into the show, who maybe didn't want to be part of it.
They explicitly said that they were. I know Miranda talked about in an interview on a podcast that she was contacted by the show to be a part of the show, and she decided that it wasn't like the best thing for her family, which like is fine. But also Taylor is the only one who is like owned up, if you want to use that term, to any of this behavior. Like the other people who Taylor has said are involved have not spoken on it, generally speaking, without being like very vague or like doing it in an ironic way on social media. So I know Miranda for a fact was contacted by the show and decided not to participate. So let's talk about our players. And I wanted to include this so you have a teeny tiny background on who these people are and if they're familiar to you. Some maybe interesting Mormon connection things that are just like helpful to know. And then as far as their Mormon status and kind of their social media profiles at this point, so you can kind of see as we go where they stand in terms of social media. So I'm going to start with Taylor Frankie Paul because personally she's my messy favorite at this point. And she
was like the original.
She is the original. So. Whitney can say all day that she's the leader of Mom Talk, but she's not. It's Taylor, and it always has been. So Taylor was like the center of the swinging scandal. She was the one, if you watch the previous video, who came out and basically talked about it and was open about it and public about it. And that's when all of that shit went down. But prior to the swinging scandal, she was on TikTok. Like, if you were on TikTok during this time, she was really famous for those videos where she said she was a grandma, and then, like, all the people would, like, rage bait in the comments and be like, you're not old enough to be a grandma, and would get, like, really upset about it. Like, she's been on TikTok and I think trying to get to a point where she's nationally recognized for a hot minute now, which, like, no disrespect. Get that back, do your thing. So, she's the center of the swinging scandal. She divorced the person that she was married to from the swinging scandal, is no longer married to him, has passed kids from that relationship, but is now in a relationship with a man named Dakota. And there's been lots of controversy around their relationship, especially since during a very intoxicated episode, she threw some things and got physical with Dakota, which resulted in an arrest for domestic violence. And so now she's on probation, I think, for like 3 years, if I recall correctly. But she's been very public about owning up to her behavior. I think she's in terms of these girls, I think she's one of the best in terms of taking accountability for shit and like owning her things. So that being said, she's kind of the center of everything, and everybody kind of hates on her for participating in what my beef is, adult consensual activities. But she has 4.5 million followers on TikTok, and she still considers herself an active Mormon. She falls into the category of Mormons that we referred to in the past that are like, Mormonism is for the sinners, like people who screw up. I'm meant to be there. I'm meant to go to church because I'm not perfect. And like, that's the purpose of it, and that's what it's there for. And so she might come off as a more progressive Mormon, or even some Mormons might not even consider her in that category, but she goes to church and she attends and she believes, but she also does things like drink. And I don't know if she's drinking anymore. She was pregnant for the majority of the show, but things like that would kind of rub Mormons the wrong way, but she still self-identifies as a Mormon.
Next we have Demure, who's 30, Demure Engelman. She is actually married to Brett Engelman, and he was cast for Claire's season of The Bachelorette. That was actually weird due to COVID because he
decided he didn't want to participate, and then there was like a whole thing with that.
And he was a former BYU quarterback, you know, all-star Mormon over here. And he was also married to Angie Harrington of Real Housewives of Salt Lake City previously.
Real Housewives of Salt Lake City overlap.
We have our connection for the
unsurprising
Mormon influencer multiverse there. Jordan did some digging, and it's just some weird connections here. His sister, Sean Southwick King, was married to Larry King.
Like the Larry King.
On TV, Larry King, from 1997 until 2019.
I don't know if she's Mormon. I don't know a lot of details about that, but I thought that it was fascinating, because who's married to Larry King? I mean, come on. Yeah,
and, well, it's safe to say that she probably grew up Mormon.
Yeah.
He was the BYU quarterback for, 4 years. She was married previously and had one child, and now
has two stepkids.
But they are experiencing fertility issues, which was something that they said was filmed for the show, but was inevitably cut.
In an interview that I read with her, they talked about kind of exploring fertility stuff and actually like being filmed having sex on the show, which, don't get me wrong, I don't know how any of that would have been orchestrated or how they would have included that, but nonetheless, on a podcast, she said it was filmed.
She posts kids content, which we kind of have beef with.
Her kids are involved in her TikTok. Not as heavily as some of the others, but still there.
And she attended at least one of Taylor's swinging parties, but declined participating.
She said she was unaware or didn't want to participate, and they left, or, they were,
Significantly fewer followers, 587,000 on TikTok, which, don't get me wrong, is a lot, but significantly fewer than Taylor.
Yeah.
And she identifies as ex-Mormon.
I think as far as I get mixed up with who was identified as what explicitly, but of the people on the show, she very explicitly talks about problems within the religion. But she still also says she's on the Mormon scale. So keep that in mind.
Very critical.
Jessie is 32. In my brain, I have coined her Brittany Dawn because that's what she looks like in my head. No shade to Jessie. I know Brittany Dawn's a terrible person, but that's just what I think of when I see her. It's just her face reminds me of Brittany.
It's a shame.
Jessie is divorced and remarried to a guy named Jordan, and she's got 3 kids total. She is the owner of like the Jay-Z styles, Jay-Z hair. Like,
unfortunate name.
I'll have McKay put up a picture of
the billboard
that has their stuff on it. Like she gets some flack for naming her hair salon and her hair empire honestly. This, but it could be. I don't know. I don't think she intentionally did that, but who knows? So she's kind of like, she's the stylist basically for all the girls on the show and is like always doing hair and things. And she's like got quite the empire. Like she's got a massive salon. She teaches people. Some people on the internet have beef with her and say that she does hair terribly, but I don't know anything about that. So I can't validate or invalidate those claims. She was doing family vlogging on YouTube. Interestingly, I found they had a family vlogging account for a while and were posting semi-regular videos, but the last video from them from family vlogging was posted 8 months ago, so I don't know when she got the call for filming the show that it was just kind of like, I don't need to bother with this anymore.
Yeah, I think they were filming at that point.
Yeah, so she's not doing that anymore. Her kids are in less of her TikToks comparably to all the other girls. Like I scrolled for a pretty long while and couldn't find any of her kids on there, so less on TikTok. And she also has less of a following on TikTok, which was interesting to me. She only has 383,000, remember, compared to Taylor, who has 4.5 million. And Jessie identifies as ex-Mormon explicitly, like has said those words and identifies as such. So
we also have Jen Affleck, who's 25 on the younger side. And just an interesting note about Jen is every single time her name is on screen, it is Jen Affleck. Everybody else is just their first name. And I don't know if it's her choice, but they are flexing the connection because her husband's cousin is
Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
Like the actor. Her and her husband Zac met at 18 and they have 2 kids.
Got married
2
really
kids
young.
at 25.
2 kids at 25 is crazy. But Mormon.
Her husband is in medical school. And she is the full-time provider, which is really interesting because her mom is an immigrant and does not come from a rich background. And her husband is going into medical school and is like a several generation back surgeon. So that's what he's going to school for. And she's the main provider.
She's the breadwinner right now.
Which is a very, very interesting dynamic, which we're especially come back to. In Mormonism. Yeah. We'll come back to that.
She highlights in the show the wealth disparity between her mother is cleaning staff at the hospital that her father-in-law is a surgeon at. So that is quite the interesting experience there.
Very interesting dichotomy. So she does kind of do family vlogging and includes her kids on her TikTok quite a bit. And I don't know, I kind of see somewhat of a trend where if you have your kids around and things like that, you have higher follower counts. She's got 1.4 million on TikTok, but she's by far the most devout of any of the ladies on the show. And even in one of the episodes, they hold a baby blessing event at her in-laws' house for their child that was born this year.
Which some of the Exmo and like the Cinery type girls were uninvited to. She's by far the most devout. Talks about garments, talks about the temple, like much more.
They even make jabs at her because of how much she's wearing her garments and talks about it. And
so then we have Michaela Matthews, who is 24. Michaela gets, I feel like, flack on the internet for her situation because she had a teen pregnancy. She got pregnant at 16 and the person involved at the time, like her husband was 21. She's still married to this man, like they're still together. So people get hesitant about that, which I understand. That's quite a big, I mean, that's a topic for another day is what I'll say.
Yes, it's not great.
It's not great.
It's not great.
No, it's really not. And so the age gap there when somebody is that young and another person is an adult, like there's a word for that, but that's a conversation for another day.
Y'all know.
So Michaela has a chronic illness, and she's talked about in the interviews that it revolves primarily around like skin issues. And so a lot of the footage, I think, from season 1 was she wasn't able to wear makeup and things because of the skincare stuff, like the skin issues that were going on. And so I think naturally she was kind of shown less than all the other girls in the season. I'm not sure if that's the reason. It kind of sounds like it is. So she's mentioned before, I'll include the screenshot that I have, that on season 2, like her struggles with chronic illness will kind of be portrayed more at the forefront so people kind of understand what's happening. And her TikTok is very family oriented. Like there is a lot of videos and images of her kids and things on her TikTok, and she has 2.6 million. And she is also explicitly ex-Mormon, she has said on a podcast recently.
Then we have Macy Neely. She's 29. She's actually my favorite on the show. I don't know if that's a controversial thing or not, but I'm going to speak my truth. She got married after college, and she owns a natal nutrition company called Baby Mama, which is actually one of the plot points on the show, is her launching that company. She got pregnant at 19, and the father of that child, he passed away. Died. Yeah, in a car accident, which is awful. And pregnant at 19 when you're Mormon is like
not unheard of.
Not strange at all. But she's a former D1 tennis player, played at BYU, so go girl. And she says she goes to church and has a temple recommend. So suck it to all the people who are like, these women are evil. They're evil and they say they love God.
Well, her bishop and her stake president seem fine with her, so.
Yep. And she has a 1.5 million on TikTok.
Okay, then we have Whitney, who's 31.
Whitney
is my least favorite. I'll say that. I've not liked her before the show, and that's continued to now. Whitney is married. She's got 2 kids, and as of currently is pregnant with her 3rd. She's had a bit of a wild recent few years. She kind of gets made fun of on the show for constantly moving around a lot because allegedly she wanted to move to California, like to become an actor, and then she came back, and then she needed to move to Hawaii, and then she came back because of the show, I think, in my opinion. And so
maybe she is a great actor, and that's why she's playing the part.
Well, this is her best shot, really.
Villain, apparently.
In my opinion, yeah. There's issues with her husband on the show. I don't want to spoil things, but there's issues with her husband, and it becomes a plot point that we will come back to when we talk about spoilers in a minute. And she's been on TikTok and in Mom Talk and on social media for a while. Like, if you remember, the thing that she gets the most flack for is she did a dance in the hospital when her kid had RSV. And that's what everybody kind of developed some strong opinions about her at that time, which
I cannot overlook.
I just don't have words for that.
Not a cute look in the slightest.
I don't get it. But she is an active Mormon. Like, she's temple marriage. She's, of the girls that I'm aware of, I'm not sure, maybe Jen. No, I don't think Jen did because she was really young. I think she's the only one. Whitney's the only one who went on a mission.
Okay.
So, which is pretty devoted in terms of Mormonism. And she talks about being an active Mormon and things and is kind of judgy about it. So she fits in well in terms of that. And then she has 2.1 million on TikTok. So not up to Taylor, but she's pretty far up there in terms of following.
And lastly, we have Layla Taylor, who's 23 and newly divorced, has 2 kids, and is the only lady on the show who is single right now, or at the time of release, as far as we know. She's not Mormon anymore, but she was brought up in Mormonism and has 202,000 followers on TikTok.
So of all of them, Layla, I think, has the smallest following, but I also loved her ability to stay like out of the drama on a reality show is kind of impressive. I don't know if that will last into season 2, but I was living for her reactions. So, okay. So now that you know who the major players are, and everybody jokes that they all look the same, many of them do.
The Mormon glaze.
The Mormon glaze is there.
It's inescapable in Utah.
The extensions, it's there. And so don't refer back to that as needed, but no, lots of people can't keep track of who is who. So as we move forward with the rest of the video, this is going to be a spoiler warning. So if you haven't watched and you don't want to watch, or
here's your cutoff.
Get out of here. Like, if you want to go watch it and you don't want us to spoil things, get out. Because we're going to talk about spoiling things now. Like, the first thing that I wanted to touch on was, we're going to talk about themes and things like, garments and sex and things that we've seen kind of that we want to bring to your attention. Another, an ex-Mormon influencer who I love is Chelsea Homer. And she wrote a Substack about Secret Housewives of Mormon Life. You know what I mean. The show that we're talking about today, she wrote a list of all the things that are like inherently Mormon about the show. And this is kind of what I was doing in my head as I was sitting there. As I was like, this show is so Mormon. Like, for people to come out here and claim that this is inaccurate, I didn't see a single inaccurate thing. When they talked about Mormonism and rules and shit, and even like some of like very lightly, briefly on church history, everything that I heard as an ex-Mormon was accurate. And so, especially as it applies to Utah, but I want to include a big but, is people will try to tell you, oh, it's just a Utah thing. It's not. It's not. It's more prevalent in Utah, but these Mormon things culture happen everywhere. And I'm not even talking about just the United States. They happens beyond the borders of the United States as well. Trust me. So I wanted to read you this list. This comes from Chelsea Homer's Substack, and I will include the link to this in the description. Read it. It's a great article. But I wanted to read this for you so you can have like a succinct thing of all the things that are inherently Mormon, and we'll talk about other things that we saw as well. Excluding family and friends from a baby blessing because they're not Mormon enough, or they're not Mormon at all. Getting married before, quote, brain is developed. High child brides. Yes, that is exactly what's happening here for a lot of these women. Commiserating over sexual trauma and lack of orgasms. Woof. Receive pressure from parents to get married. Garment checking. Zoom a missionary. Like, you know, when they zoom in from like another location. For a baby blessing. Mm-hmm. Be courted by an adult man as a Maya maid. So Maya maid is one of the young women kind of age groups within Mormonism. Michaela. That would be Michaela. Coin soda shops as a vice. You saw so many soda shops on the show. Like, I don't think they ever went to a Fizz, but Thirst was on there. Somebody saw Fizz. Somebody did see a Fizz. Yeah, okay. I've seen Fizz on there. Lots of soda shops. Use Botox laughing gas to get high, which was a loophole. I had no idea about this. I've never heard of that. Work done, and I didn't even know that was an option. But apparently, it's like a thing that Mormon women, or like women who go get work done, particularly Mormon women, are like, hell yeah, I can do the laughing gas because I'm getting Botox done. Didn't know that was a thing. Right. But it is a loophole. That's a Mormon loophole right there. Like, I'm getting medical work done so I can get high, you know? Agonizing over promoting sex toys, which was a plot point with Whitney that we'll come back to. Talking about porn addictions. Questioning parents for never giving the sex talk. Very common. Hanging Jesus pictures on every wall, like especially the big ones. Like, people have asked, do they really do that? Yes, they really do. Fearing Las Vegas. Yeah, Las Vegas being Sin City. Sin City indeed. Not knowing personal anatomy. Yes, particularly women's anatomy. That will be one that we'll come back to. Romanticizing homestead living. Looking at you, Bowery Farm. Wannabe Whitney. Relying on Mormon men for approval. I'll add in there, deferring to Mormon men for their opinions. Changing their opinions based on what your Mormon husband says. Planning group dates to get Botox. Love that for Mormon women, am I right? Making a Ted Bundy reference. Also an inherently Mormon thing to do, as bizarre as that may sound. Ted Bundy was Mormon, was baptized Mormon, if you didn't know. Slut-shaming friends. Yes. Being critical of women for, like, quote, quote, slutty behavior. Pray about sleep, food, and a narcissistic husband. There certainly is, in my opinion, at least one of those on here. Ending arguments with agree to disagree.
Hey, everybody.
Welcome back to our podcast where we agree
to disagree.
Make God in our likeness. My God is chill. Like, I feel like I'm right in God's eyes. I feel like Taylor takes that on quite a bit. Like, I've repented. I've done my part. I still show up, you know, making Mormon God who they want him to be. Gag at the first taste of wine. That is very accurate.
Particularly, wasn't it?
It was champagne, I think.
Sparkling water and wine.
Yeah. Worry about Mormon men murdering their wives. Yep, that came up. Announce a pregnancy creatively or disgustingly, depending on your opinion. Have a baby. Legit, very Mormon thing to do. Host an adult birthday party at classic skating. You know, Mormons got to get creative about the events that they do.
So painful.
Sacrifice dreams to relocate for husband's job and schooling. So, ouch. I love this list from Chelsea. I think there's plenty more. I think we could sit here and theorize on like a million other things that are in there that we saw also. But I think this does a pretty good job of portraying the level of Mormonism and Mormon culture that is accurate.
The
and
Mormonosity of
typical
the show.
To Mormons that was present in this show.
To piggyback off what Chelsea Homer so beautifully pointed out, we have a few points of our own that we were noticing while we were watching binging the show, if we're being honest.
Yeah. So the first topic that I wanted to start with that I feel like is a very prominent Mormon thread throughout this whole thing is sex in general. So like sex on the show, in every reality TV show, I feel like it's present to some degree because it's like salacious and it gets people to watch, right? So Layla talks about, despite being married and having kids with somebody, she also got married really young, having never experienced like orgasm ever up to that point. I hope she has now. I hope she's in a better place now. But I can't tell you, like, even in my experience professionally working with Mormon women, just how, and ex-Mormon women and everybody in between, just how common it is to not have that be a priority. It's like sex within Mormonism is very purposeful, and it's purposeful in the sense of like, I know not every Mormon is like, we only have sex to like procreate, but the purposeness kind of extends into like even when it's just like for fun and not for procreation, because it's like the priorities and the misogyny and the patriarchy that exists within Mormonism transfers into sex. Men's pleasure is priority number one, and women are always just kind of secondary. So like lots of obligation sex, lots of non-consensual behavior, lots of lack of informed consent, lots of guilt and shame. But this idea that it's like, oh, I have to like, you know, cater to my husband, and then I'm just kind of like he's not going to go over top to make sure.
Afterthought.
Like I'm also enjoying the experience, which also links back to kind of a Mormon belief that's not explicitly taught, but is in kind of implicitly there, which is women are not sexual beings and don't experience pleasure. And so that's kind of something that you learn young in Mormonism, where like men are getting all these talks that are like, don't watch porn, you know, don't,
like every month,
don't do self-care, if you know what I'm talking about. Like they get that constantly, and women don't. Women just get the like, you have to be modest, and if your boobs are out, then you're gonna make a man falter, and then he's gonna watch porn, and then it's gonna be your fault. Or it's like, you know, if you have sex before marriage, then you're gonna be a damaged metaphor of some kind. Like when I was growing up, it was like, you know, a hole in something, or a dirty cupcake, or, you know, a sweet food with like a bug in it, or like something disgusting. Like they do those things all the time, to the point that I'm still hearing about it with like younger generations today professionally. That I think is just a consequence of like all of this, and you guys are seeing it on like a reality show level, but that's like, in my opinion, the underworkings of the sex stuff, like especially when they're talking about the whole Fruity Pebbles thing. Like that blew my mind, because something like that, and maybe it's just because I work with couples all the time, but something about that to me was like, that's not really wild or that shocking to me. Like that's not something that I'd be like, oh my God, you did what? But in Mormonism, something like that is so out of like the cookie cutter norm. Like you're not going to see, generally speaking, a ton of people in Mormonism who are into like kink or things, generally speaking. There's exceptions, I will say, but generally speaking.
And just to paint a picture for those of you who are new here and may not have heard me talking about this, because this is my favorite thing to share in regards to this topic. When Jordan and I were getting our interviews done so that we could be married in the temple, our our stake president, after the interviews, pulled us both in and counseled us to not seek the use of machinery or tools, which verbatim, what he said to describe, you know, objects or toys. And because he, in his experience, had seen a lot of heartache and issues coming from that, which is, in what I heard, was men are not getting the job done. Women are going to seek something that can get the job done. And then those men are feeling inadequate because they don't do it. And then it causes issues in their marriage. And then they go to their ecclesiastical leaders for counsel on something that they should go to a therapist for.
Yeah.
So he was just getting in front of it by saying, hey, don't seek after these things because it just causes problems, which is not the case. Though it cause problems in his experience, but is largely not what happens.
Probably some projection happening there. But that was ARCs, and we make fun of it to this day because it's like, first of all, who's calling it machinery?
Yeah.
It's like bringing the forklift in the bedroom. Like, what are you thinking? But that's just how deep this goes, that even like we experienced it, and the conversations around these things were things that we both got as children too. But also during that conversation when they're talking about the Fruity Pebbles thing, like, and they're having that conversation and Whitney has to whisper it to Michaela. Like, they're not even, and maybe that was because they didn't want the cameras to hear. I don't know. But that's not uncommon Mormon behavior to be very secretive about those kinds of things.
They were also acting it out, so.
Right. So, like, but so much shame tied to those things. And I'm sure Demure felt shame by everybody else, like, bringing it up, and then Whitney doing, like, a stupid, inappropriate thing. But, and then on top of that, we also have, further on in the season, we see the whole vulva vagina thing where every, like, sex therapist I know is screaming at the screen, it's a vulva, not a vagina, and women not knowing their anatomy
the difference
is common because, generally speaking, not all Mormon parents, but there is certainly a lack of Mormon parents who educate their children on sex, sexuality, anatomy, these kinds of things, which is generally necessary. And Utah is abstinence only education, so they're going to get very limited information when it comes to sex in schools. And so that's a massive issue where we don't even know the labels of things and women aren't even familiar, which generally just creates more shame, which also led to the shame around around Whitney's brand deal when she had that brand deal that came up and she was like, I don't know if I want to do it, but it's $20,000, which was like mind-boggling to me.
It was a brand deal with a company that makes toys for context.
And so she was like, I don't know if I can do it. And her mom was like, I don't know that you should. And there was kind of some back and forth, and I think she eventually did it anyway. But the shame around, like, oh, if I do this or if I represent this and say that this was enjoyable for me or I appreciate it or like whatever, then it's in conflict with Mormon values. Women's pleasure is in conflict with Mormon values. Like, that's at its like surface level is what that is for me.
Yeah.
Is that's never going to be prioritized, and there's shame for that, and you're going to be shamed by other people for that, which also showed up in the Las Vegas when the girls went to Chippendales episode.
The girls trip.
And there was lots of conversation and controversy around like whether they should be going to a Chippendales show and what does that mean, and that's when we saw issues with Zac and Jen in particular. We'll come back to that. And then swinging, like I mentioned earlier, my biggest beef with the whole swinging thing is I feel bad for Taylor because as much as everybody has piled on to her when it comes to shame, at its core, this is adults, like well into adulthood, 20s, late 20s, like not even like shy of 18. Like we're well into adulthood by this point, who are participating in adult consensual activities. Nobody here is underage. She's not doing anything perverse. This is the shame that the public, in my opinion, largely has around sex and non-monogamy and what people do in the bedroom, and particularly Mormons, because that is outside of Mormon behavior. But this also demonstrates the loopholes that Mormons will go to try to justify behavior to fit in a Mormon context. Like, okay, if we're not swapping entirely, like if we're just doing it next to each other, then...
Yeah. If we're just kissing each other's partners, then it's okay.
Or if just the girls do it, then it's fine. Like,
or if it's just soaking, then
it's okay.
Then it's okay.
Like, poop hole.
I'm not saying that's what they were doing, but
this is exactly what it is. It's like, how much of a scenario or a loophole can I create where I can make this make sense in my head and not feel like I have to go to the bishop about it? But it bothers me because this is like the epitome of sexual shame. All the sexual shame that everybody else feels gets projected onto Taylor. And it's like, oh, you're all these horrible names that they use for women, like, sluttish and whorish and like all these other things. And God, she's been called the worst things imaginable.
Trashy.
Yeah. Like, for scenarios that I'm like, these are adults participating in consensual activities. And just because you wouldn't do it doesn't mean that you get to apply the whore label to Taylor, because it's not something that you personally would engage in.
Yeah.
If that conflicts with your values, fine. Fine. Respect that. Do what works for you.
But don't project them onto somebody
But don't
else.
project that bullshit onto her just because you wouldn't do the same thing. Her kids were taken care of when it was happening. Her kids were asleep when it was happening. I saw people giving her shit because her kids were asleep when it was happening. When do you want married couples who are monogamous to do it? Do you expect them to not do it when their kids are home? Like, what is that? Explain that to me. But like, she gets so much shame that I think is unfair when it's just everybody's personal projections of like, oh, I wouldn't do that, or that makes me uncomfortable, that they then throw on her and make it a personality defect in Taylor. And she's also the only one that's actually opened up about any of this, which I kind of commend her for.
Yeah.
That's my soapbox for Taylor. I think she gets way too much hate, and I think it's not fair.
This next one, we did write some stuff down because there were some things about it, and a lot of people were asking us about it. There was speculation with Whitney's husband because he had owned up to being on dating apps, and that was kind of a plot point with him not being faithful to her in that capacity, and that he was also watching pornography and things like that. But the
using
dating
the
apps,
addiction term.
Yeah. And there was speculation that he was using Grindr, which, if you don't know, is a specifically gay and LGBTQ friendly dating app. And a lot of accusations that I've seen personally too across social media about him being gay and things like that. If you're new here, we don't speculate on people's sexualities, especially if they have not said specifically one thing or another. I personally believe that it is the power of each individual person to be able to express their sexuality as they see fit. And when we go in and we are like, obviously the memes are funny, your husband is gay, but honestly it's just taking that moment away from him, even if, you know, he's in a heterosexual relationship. Bi erasure is a thing. There's all kinds of stuff. Jordan is bisexual and she's married to me. That might not surprise a lot of you because I'm a gamer and a total golden retriever, but you know, so
it's just not fair because there's also a lot of, like, as most of you know, there's a lot of shame in Mormonism about the LGBTQ plus community being gay, being bi, like anything under that spectrum is not okay. And so even if he is, like, he's grown up in an environment that's told him that he needs to hate himself for that. And so people out here coming around and being like, oh, you're gay, like that's not doing anything. Like, that's not helpful at all. And if he is, maybe he's bisexual, and then all you people are like bi erasure ass all over the place, and maybe he is, and he's choosing to be with Whitney because he's bisexual. Like, the problem is that we don't know, and it's not fair to speculate because there has been nothing other than that comment, which was never verified by Whitney herself, other than saying that he was on Tinder. Specifically, not Grindr, Tinder. There was a weird out of context comment that was also, I think, edited weirdly at the time, where somebody was like, oh, is he like having problems with his sexuality or like confused about his sexuality or something? But we didn't get anything other than that. So that doesn't lead me to believe anything. Yeah. So you can speculate all the live long day if you want, but I just want you to know that it's harmful, especially if he is. Like, that's not helping anything.
Yeah.
That's not helping anyone.
If he is, that makes him a victim of Mormon rhetoric and the culture there, especially in Utah.
Exactly. So, like, just don't do that. Yeah. Like, you can have your own theories and whatever, but like posting that on the internet, like, in my opinion, is just unnecessarily hateful. Like, you can have beef with him because he cheated on Whitney or like got on dating apps, and you fall that under the cheating category. That's fine. But it's not fair, I don't think, to Whitney or him to be just running around all the time and saying, Connor's gay. Like, I don't think it's fair. Okay, so we wanted to talk about Zac, who is Zac Affleck, who is Jen Affleck's husband. I should be using their last name the whole time.
Zac Affleck.
We wanted to talk about him because in the episodes, a major plot point is when all of the girls go to Chippendales, and it's kind of on Jesse for not telling them. I think Jesse should have informed them what they were getting into in terms of going to a Chippendale show.
I absolutely am critical of Jesse for that because she absolutely, not even that she should have known, she absolutely knew that it was going to be a thing. Respond. So I'm going to give Jesse the benefit of the doubt and thinking that this was just set up by the producers because they knew that it would cause drama, which is not a great look on the producers because it did cause actual harm.
It did. But made for great TV, which is probably what they were looking for.
Exactly.
So basically, they went to this show. Jen was uncomfortable with it. A few of the other girls were uncomfortable with it. And Jen's husband and Taylor's boyfriend particularly, and a little bit of Michaela's husband as well, were upset with the content of the show and didn't want them participating in it. And so I think for Mormon people, for like Mormon men especially, I feel like they're getting highlighted in a way that most Mormon people aren't. And representation is extremely important to Mormonism. Like, you know, what did your parents tell you every time you left the house?
Remember who you are and what you stand for, and no sex before marriage.
Right.
Every time.
Right. So there's these very big expectations, and then now they're kind of on a national spotlight. And so Zac, I think, as most Mormon men are very concerned about how women represent themselves in Mormonism and like how they look and what they do. And going to a show like this that is sexual in nature is something that makes him look bad, he feels. He feels that it makes him look bad. But the gist of this is, what really gets me is Jen never went to the show. Jen was informed of what was happening, showed up to the thing, said I'm uncomfortable, I don't really like this, told Zac. Zac freaked out, and then she left.
She wasn't even informed until they were on the party bus or whatever large vehicle they were in on their way there.
So she never willingly went to this thing. Like, she was never willingly a participant, and she did not participate or watch the show in any way. She left because what we see on camera is Zac texting her a bunch of stuff and then calling her and talking to her on the phone and talking to her in a very derogatory manner, to the point that Jen has to say something along the lines of, can you talk to me like I'm a human, or can you treat me like I'm a human, please? And this, I think, highlights insecure Mormon men who something like this, whether it triggers like a fragile masculinity thing or whether it triggers like this says something about who we are as Mormons, I think is more what that falls under for him. And he ended up sending her this horrible text message that the camera crew was able to get, that's actually legible, that I'll have McKay put on the screen, which is pretty terrible. It's like very demeaning and very like, I don't want to hear about your bullshit anymore. And without saying that, obviously, without swearing, because they don't do that. But did drop the R word, which is, and so just very like, you know, our other friends wouldn't do this because she would never like our friends, assuming that's who they were talking about, wouldn't do this because the wife in that situation would never disrespect the husband in that way. And things like that. And just absolutely losing it to the point that Jen was in tears and sobbing and crying. And they talked and went back and forth. And she was upset. And the girls were trying to make her feel better. And then she disappears in the middle of the night, presumably to go to him to try to calm him down. Because he's basically saying, I'm done. He's saying, like, I want a divorce. I'm done with you. Like, blah, blah, blah. Which, like, to me, once again, I'm like, she did not even go to this thing.
Yeah.
She did not even go to this thing. And if anything, it's great for Mormon standards because she did exactly what Mormons are supposed to do in this situation. And she left. Like, when Mormons, like, your parents prepare you. If you get in a situation like that, you can call me. You can pick me up. You need to leave. Like, you need to stand on your values.
Like Joseph and run out of there.
And run away. And that's what she did. Which, if that's her values, I can respect that. But she left, and he's still raking her over the freaking coals and being extremely disrespectful. And lots of people are labeling it as narcissistic. Not a narcissist, but narcissistic tendencies. And these poor other women are trying to help her and trying to talk to her and tell her that it's not going to get better and he's going to continue to do this. And he does all this terrible stuff, and then she comes back the next day and she's like, you know what? It was needed. Like, it was needed. Yeah. It was supposed to happen. And we're good now. And you just have to be the friend in that situation that's like, what? And like, this is normal for Mormon women. Like, getting chastised by your husband and being disrespected. And it's not all Mormons, but I think Chelsea worded it really well in her article. Men have no incentive to, like, prioritize or respect women in Mormonism in any way. Like, not in the home, not in church, not in finances, not in anything. And I think it rubs Zac wrong because he's not the breadwinner in this situation and she is. And so I think it already kind of questions the traditional roles that they're supposed to have. But then to, like, behave like that and to just be like, yeah, it's fine. Like, it's okay. Like, normalizing this horrible behavior that shouldn't exist, you know?
And the cherry on top of all of this situation, in my opinion, is that as far as the show portrayed, he was having most of this conversation over text from the casino where he was gambling money that she had given him, because that's something that he likes to do. And before that, before the whole trip had started, she had revealed to the producers. And one of the things that I was like the most disappointed about in the entire show was she said, I just don't want to make him look like a bad person. And then she goes on to reveal that his parents had given them money for his medical school, and he had gambled it all away.
Gambling isn't allowed in Mormonism, for those that are asking.
Yes, it is frowned upon big time.
Explicitly in the handbook, right?
In the handbook.
At least
and
it used to
it's
be.
not scripture or anything like that, but it is very, very frowned upon.
It's against the rules.
And so it's clear that he has a problem with gambling, and on top of that, he is the one who is going to school and is taking up a lot of the expenses, and she is the one who is generally supporting them. And she said, okay, please don't go and spend all of this money at the casino. And then he has the audacity for her to just rake her over the coals
while he's texting her from the poker table.
Yeah. So it was really disappointing that she was like, oh, don't make him look bad. And then he just like goes and does it himself, because I don't know. There was a lot to infer about their relationship just from that whole situation, and it looked pretty bleak. So.
It was pretty bad. I mean, just unequivocally, no man should talk to you that way in any religion for any reason.
No partner
under any circumstance
should talk to you that way.
Like, nobody should talk to you that way. But this kind of thing in Mormonism is more normalized because, you know, men have the priesthood, and I think there's just some kind of implicit understanding that, like, what I say goes, and your job is to fall in line.
Yeah.
And so if I think this is bad, even if you didn't go, then I'm going to punish you for not going. And you don't really get to say shit about it because I'm the one with the magical penis power that says that you can't do that, you know?
Yeah. Well, and a lot of these ladies got married in the temple, like us, in a time where when you go through the endowment ceremony in preparation to be sealed as husband and wife for time and all eternity, the instruction at the time was that men in the first section were covenanting with God, and then their wives were covenanting with their husbands to listen to and hearken to their husbands as their husbands hearken to and listen to God.
Yep.
So they were totally cut out of the equation of that connection to God, unless it is through their husband. So you can see kind of the ideology trickling down into other things where, oh, I have the priesthood, I have that connection to God, and you should listen to me because I am the one who is covenanted with him, and you are covenanted with me, and you have nothing there.
Exactly.
It has since changed, which I think was a positive change.
But culturally,
yes,
systemically, it does not.
It has. There are a lot of people who need to die out to have that completely erased and swept under the rug.
Exactly. And that falls under the same category with kind of the dads. Like, there's a conversation between Jesse and Jen where Jesse's like, you know, we went on this girls trip for like a weekend, and her husband's like, are any of the nannies available? Because he doesn't want to be home with the kids, or he's nervous about being home with the kids or whatever. And so there's this kind of, again, normalized expectation where dads just don't show up in the same way that moms do, and like it's normal. And Jen was like feeling similarly and was kind of talking about like trying to find my voice and them being uncomfortable with it, and just kind of men being portrayed within Mormonism as like incompetent when it comes to parenting. Yeah. And that's not the case for all of them. Again, I know plenty of Mormon dads who are very involved, but there is kind of this, if they aren't, it's somewhat normalized to a degree. Because like, oh, I have to work all the time, and I'm gone all the time, and I don't have time to be home with the kids, and that's your responsibility. And like,
well, in a lot of situations too, there are Mormon bishops, and not even just that. There are callings and things that you're asked to do that are additional to your work duties. So a lot of times, especially as a bishop, luckily my father was a bishop when I was already an adult and my sister was in high school. She was the last one. But I mean, you're going to work, and then like 3 out of the 5 weekdays, you also have to go to the church to go do stuff in the evening.
Till late, like 7, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night.
And then Sundays, you're gone basically the whole day. So they're setting up these situations where it's like, family is forever and blah, blah, blah. And it kind of can be used as justification for, oh, this stuff needs to be done at church, and we're going to call you to have that be your responsibility. Yeah, we understand that you're not going to be around your children, but that's okay because you'll be with them forever, so it doesn't matter. But it does, in my opinion.
It does.
Another really grating thing that we saw, very Mormon thing that we saw in the series was the relationship that Taylor has with her parents. And we didn't really see a lot of anybody else's parents, but they are very, very enmeshed, and there's almost no boundaries between them, it seems like. It's very evident in the show, especially like Taylor has them over, and she's breaking the news to them that Dakota's moving into her house. Like, this is her home, not anything to do with her parents. Her home, and they're like freaking out about it.
Like, you should get married, which is like common Mormon pressure.
Yes.
Like, especially if you're pregnant, which she was pregnant with Dakota's child at that point. It's like, it doesn't matter. And like, my family was like this too. Doesn't matter what the relationship is. Doesn't matter if he's the worst man in the world. You need to get married. And that is the only thing that will make you look better. This was a question we got. That is the only thing that will make you look better in the eyes of the church at that point. If you get pregnant out of wedlock, which I hate even using that term, because like, what is this, like 1920? But the idea that is like, enter into a relationship which may or may not be toxic and not good for you, just for the purpose of saying that you're married.
Yep.
So it looks better than you having a child out of wedlock.
Yeah. Well, and we can even infer in situations like with Michaela, where she was pregnant at a very young age. In a lot of those cases, the bishop will essentially pull these people aside, and they'll be like, you either need to get married, and then you will have this child, and you'll raise this child, and then you can go forth in church as usual, and eventually you can get sealed, because after a sin like that, you have to wait to be able to get sealed. You can't get sealed on your wedding day. Or you have to let the baby be adopted by somebody else. And that's not like trying to be salacious or anything.
That's the way it
know
was.
People who had
Family
to
members.
do that. Who had to do that. And it's an awful practice, because that is such a difficult choice to be forcing onto people, and that is like a really good way to increase the divorce rate, honestly, or the domestic abuse rate.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because they're not even caring about that. It's just like, it looks bad that you're pregnant and you're not together, or you're like, you're not married on paper, which is ridiculous. But enmeshment in Mormonism and other religions also is very common, because there's boundaries within Mormonism aren't encouraged, and so everybody's just kind of on top of each other in terms of decision making and values, and there's a massive lack of like individuality and differentiation. If I make choices that are in my values but different from yours, then it doesn't just feel like I'm growing up and doing my own thing and making my own choices. It feels like a personal attack on you, and that can cause a lot of issues. Like, Taylor's mom calling Whitney when she didn't come to the baby shower absolutely blew my mind. Like, if Taylor asked her to do that, that's one thing, but the camera crew did not make it seem like that was the case for what happened, and I think it's just really inappropriate. Like, I'm just going to automatically involve myself in your business and cause problems and stir the pot because I feel like I want to. Or, like, I'm going to give you my constant opinion on how terrible Dakota is and how this is such a bad relationship and you need to get your shit together and all this stuff, where it's like, if that's not being asked, my old supervisor in terms of therapy used to say, as your children get older and as they become adults themselves, your role as a parent goes from kind of a parenting role to more of a coaching role. There's less involvement. You're less focused on keeping them alive. There's less involvement in their day-to-day activities and more along the lines of like coaching them when they come to you and they actually need help with something. And so that requires some respect for their self-individuation and creating boundaries and making mistakes and doing things in the world. And instead of shaming them and being like, no, you have to get married, it's like, let them figure it out.
Seriously.
Like, let her figure it out. If it's not, like, if she doesn't feel comfortable marrying that guy right now, she needs to lean into that intuition and not do it. Like, I don't know how to be any clearer than that, but that's not what her parents have gotten from Mormonism. And I know the intention of her mom, I'm sure, is good. But this is very common Mormon behavior.
I'm sure it's just a symptom of the decay, the moral decay in the fabric of our society, that the people don't want to get married and they're having kids together. And
nobody
blah,
wants
blah,
to have
blah.
kids anymore. And blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
So that's just a hallmark of the Mormon experience.
Mm-hmm. And they were kind of mean. Like first episode, her mom was like really critical and cruel, which I think to some degree was unnecessary. Like, I get like when you need to be a hard ass sometimes. Yeah. But she's also an adult. It's not the same as if she was 16 and going out and like doing this bullshit. Yeah. And like being cruel and mean isn't an effective parenting strategy. Just ask my mom. Haha.
Oh, you can't because
I haven't talked to her for years. Ha ha ha. So funny. Okay. But anyway, another point that I wanted to bring up was sameness, because there is an expectation of sameness within Mormonism, especially for women. And this isn't written explicitly anywhere, but like Mormon Stories recently did a podcast about this where they talked about how the rate of plastic surgery in Utah was higher than anywhere else. And we've talked about that before as well. And plastic surgery and cosmetic procedures like Botox, like outpatient procedures. Like I saw earlier that Layla's had a nose job. We had Jessie who had like multiple, focused on like intimate female anatomy that I can't talk about explicitly on our YouTube channel, had surgery in that area on the show that was part of the show. Like cosmetic surgery and Mormon women, generally speaking, kind of go hand in hand. Because people are like, oh no, it's only the influencers. And I'm like, the rates don't support that. Because if it was only the influencers, we don't have that many influencers in Utah.
The market
like statistically
would be
saturated. Speaking. Yeah. Like breast augmentation, I think, is the most common plastic surgery inpatient in Utah. So many Mormon women, I know, like my age group, with boob jobs now. Like, it is very common. And I support anybody who wants to do cosmetic surgery or whatever.
Do you think?
That feels good for you, then great. But it is interesting how it is becoming, like, especially with these women, just like a very common thing. Like, let's go to our Botox appointment. Let's go together. Let's get our Botox done. Let's do laughing gas. Like, ha ha ha. Like, it's very interesting that, you know, that and being blonde, like, everybody's like, all the Mormons are blonde. Lots of them are. I was, like, high maintenance blonde for a long time. And having long hair, like the extensions, Whitney is the only one that doesn't really have long hair. Jen has like shorter hair, but the majority of them have extensions. That's also extremely common. Like there's just these very like, one of the feedback things that we hear from people when they go to Utah is like, they all look kind of the same. Which generally speaking, like population wise, there is a bit of a lack of diversity. You've got primarily white people being the majority demographic in a lot of these cities, especially places like St. George, where it is the like whitest city, one of the whitest towns in the US. And so you have that kind of going for you also, but there is just kind of, you know, people call it like the Mormon glaze, and there's just like an overall look to being Mormon. And I think that was very much highlighted on the show, especially when people are like, can't tell people apart. Like I hear people say all the time that Jessie and Demure look very similar. Like, now that I've watched the show, like, obviously I know who they are and I can tell them apart, but I can see what people are saying and that it's like, wow, all of these women kind of look the same. Yeah. You know? So that's just an interesting, like, very Mormon thread that runs through all this. And the other, like, some Mormons are going to be in denial about this, and that's fine, but it doesn't mean it's not happening. And that's, like, the thing that I want to emphasize with all of this is, like, Mormons can say, like, the Mormons especially who are pissed off about the show, can say that these things aren't happening. But that doesn't mean that they're not. Like, you can just be in denial about it, but statistics don't lie. Yeah. Stats don't lie.
They will still say what they want to say, even if it's absolutely not the truth. You can present some people.
It's a Mormon skill.
It's not exactly their fault because this is instilled in them because of Mormonism. Yep. You can present cold, hard facts and they will say, no, that's not how it is.
It's anti-Mormon lies.
It's anti-Mormon lies.
It's ex-Mormon rhetoric. They're trying to push on you. That's from Satan. Like, Mormonism is great at information control in that way, because they can just label anything as like an anti-Mormon lie. Anything that I don't agree with, anti-Mormon lie.
Thought stopping.
Anti-Mormon lie. That's a lie. That's a lie. That's not true. That's something you read on the internet by some angry ex-Mormon who's pissed off about the church. They have like a perfect thought stopping technique for anything that comes up in that realm. But in terms of doctrine, in terms of rules, there's nothing that I saw in here that misrepresented Mormonism. You have some women who don't play by the rules 100% of the time. Yes. But they did not misrepresent those rules.
Nope.
They said women aren't, like, Mormons aren't allowed to drink.
We don't drink
They said
alcohol.
Mormons aren't allowed to do drugs. They said Mormons aren't allowed to, you know, porn is bad. They said Mormons aren't allowed to have sex before marriage. Like, there was nothing in there, because we were waiting. Like, we were fine-tuned, waiting for something to be said that was inaccurate. And there was nothing. So there was no, and I think the producers probably did that on purpose. Like, we will be 100% accurate in all the information that we put forth about Mormonism. So nobody can claim that. And they're still going to claim it anyway. But there was nothing in there that was inaccurate in terms of Mormonism. The thing that's bothering those people is you have women who aren't going to be squandered by those rules. And are choosing not to, and still choose to wear the Mormon label. And that's their choice. And I think largely this becomes a bigger discussion around who's, like, Mormons get picky about who's able to speak, like, with authority on Mormonism. Like, who's allowed to speak on Mormonism, because ex-Mormons can't. So the only people who can speak about Mormonism are, like, the prophets and the church leaders and the people who follow every single rule to a T. Those are the only people who can speak about Mormonism, which is bullshit, because personally, and I think Chelsea Homer has talked about this on her social media as well, is like, anybody who's ever claimed Mormonism ever, in my opinion, feels like you have the ability to talk about Mormonism. If you dedicated your life to Mormonism for the majority of it, you can speak on it. Because I'm not out here just spitting lies. Mormons think that because they don't want to investigate anything I have to say. Because then that questions the factual basis with which they stand on, which I understand. But again, that doesn't take away the truth of any of these things. Like, you can continue to live in denial, but it doesn't change the facts.
Yeah. Well, and it brings up the conversation of, even with these ladies, how, oh, nobody can leave the church alone. The world just can't leave the church alone. The ex-Mormons can leave the church, but they can't leave it alone. And a lot of people, they bring up, well, you left it. It's not a part of your life anymore. So why do you continue to speak on it? Why do you continue to be involved in it? Do you think I just do this for fun? No. If I could just leave the church and never have to ever hear a single Mormon scripture or have anything affect my life, I would do that. But the fact of the matter is, it is a regular part of our life, even still, because the entirety of my family and Jordan's, even though we don't have a lot of contact with her, just her dad is not, everybody's still Mormon.
It was an issue this morning.
It
was a thing we got into, not with each other, but about it today.
Yeah, it's always going to be a part of our lives. So people who are in that situation, and those who live in Utah too. If you live in Utah, you have all the fucking license in the world to be talking about Mormonism.
because it impacts your life.
Even at a government level where there is a disparity of, even though Mormons are only making up 50% of the Utah population, they are overrepresented in the legislature and things like that. So, but this whole show brings back around the point that we always make when we talk about Mormon influencers and the way that they misrepresent the religion, because you can go on and paint it as, oh, garments are just like a whatever thing. Oh, it's like really not that strict or whatever. And everybody's kind of okay with it. But as soon as this show had the trailer drop, everybody was raining down on these ladies about how they're not Mormons, despite that being completely untrue.
Despite them having temple recommends.
A small amount of them. So as soon as you take it just a little bit too far, you're openly drinking alcohol or whatever, then you're not claimed anymore. You may have been baptized. You might be a part of this church. You might be on the rolls. you might be expected to show up or whatever, but you're not a Mormon anymore. And I had somebody in some Instagram comments essentially just point blank, bold face, just tell me, yes, they're not Mormons because they don't follow the thing. And
talk to their bishop.
If you have a problem with that, then that's the thing.
That's a bishop issue.
This is the problem with Orthodox Mormonism, is that's exactly how it is. It's policing people.
It's surveillance.
What?
Surveillance.
It's surveilling other people. It's making sure that everybody's following the commandments that you're supposed to. And a lot of what I think boils down to, from what I've seen, and is it seems like a lot of people are a little bit jealous. I hate to throw this out there, that they are out here, they're living the commandments, they're staying true to the covenants that they made when they entered the temple and when they got sealed, and they're not having any fun doing it. Because it's not a lot of fun. It's very restrictive and everything, and then you see these ladies out here doing it. So you're not going to change what you're doing. You're just going to point your finger and say, they're not Mormon. They're not doing it right.
Yep.
So,
it's ironic because it's kind of what we point out when we talk about Mormon influencers, but like none of them were bothered by that prior to this.
Yeah.
And none of them were bothered by the specific people that we've pointed out. And my beef with this is always going to generally come down to one thing. Until I can be proven by these Mormon influencers that they are not taking the money that they're earning specifically from social media and paying tithing on it, that will always be my issue. Like, I really want to support these women, but I even have some cognitive dissonance around it, because I feel like if I do, in some way I am kind of contributing. And I mean, no ethical consumption under capitalism at the end of the day. But that's always going to be my biggest issue, is I know that Jen and others are probably paying 10% of that money that they're making off of you watching their videos, you watching their stuff, is going to be paid to the Mormon Church to lobby for homophobic shit, to lobby for transphobic shit, to continue to raise the suicide rate of like LGBTQ plus children in the state of Utah. Like, that's always going to be the biggest beef that I have. But I know, like, this is about where we step out of the black and whiteness of these topics and try to land in the land of nuance of, like, at the same time, I kind of love this for them, because we're stepping out of the rigidity of it has to be this way and you have to do it this way and it has to be in the box and you have to do it this way, and being like, no, I feel like I'm Mormon and I feel like I'm the Mormon label, but I'm comfortable with drinking. And is that okay? To your bishop, it's not gonna be. But, like, can we get there? Like, do things like this? Like, we have two responses, generally speaking, that I think we're going to see here that we've talked about all the time. We generally have a church who is going to decide, we're losing people hemorrhaging en masse. What are we going to do about it? We're going to loosen some restrictions. We're going to say don't wear garments anymore. We're going to change the temple ceremonies so they're only an hour long. We're going to change church to only an hour long, whatever. Or they're going to double down and say that those people aren't welcome here. And especially with the recent call to membership council of Nemo, the Mormon, who's another, like, progressive-ish Mormon creator.
Progressive is understatement.
Yes.
Nemo is one of those Mormons who claim, or I don't even know if he applies that to him, but he is very progressive, and I've said it in the past, if you are not afraid of membership council getting called to a court of love and being excommunicated, if what you're doing is not going to get you any of that, then you're not doing anything as far as activism within the church goes. And Nemo is very the embodiment. He's becoming a martyr on that hill. So I love that for him. But
so also, because of that, I think Nelson, the current prophet, is going to die. I think he's very old and uninvolved
100.
at this point.
He just turned 100.
He just turned 100. And so the guy who's next in line, Dallin Oaks, is extreme, punitive, lawyer, homophobic, transphobic as it gets, loves to hate the gays anytime he opens his mouth. Like, we are entering into kind of what I believe is going to be a new era of Mormonism, where we're getting away from less punitive and it's going to be more punitive, which is justified by a PowerPoint that was leaked from somebody who presumably works at the church, that was talking about how Dallin, who's going to be the next prophet, is saying that he is disappointed by, like, the low amount of membership councils or disciplinary councils that the church is having, because he believes that the disciplinary councils helps people stay in the church. And they do, right? They get excommunicated and they have, like, a very very tough path to getting back in the church if they really want to. So that's some like ridiculous logic.
Disfellowship, which is a little bit different. It's kind of like a soft excommunication,
But I think, like, if I was these women, if I was in these women's position, I would be worried because
about
of the
membership.
next era in the church is something that I don't think we've necessarily seen before. And I think especially if he's coming for Nemo, anybody on this show who is an active Mormon, I would be worried, because I think Dallin does not take lightly to the church being misrepresented in this way, and for people to saying like, oh, well, I drink, but I have a temple recommend. I don't think that bullshit is going to stand. If I were in these women's positions, I would be a little scared of what's to come, because I think as Dallin ushers in his reign as prophet of the Mormon church, probably here within the next few months, if not sooner, I think we're going to see some shifts. And I think this like disciplinary council thing that got leaked is the tip of the fucking iceberg. And I don't want these women to get excommunicated by any means.
I don't think the church wants them.
But I don't think the church wants them in as much as it's a risk to excommunicate them, and it's a risk to keep them in.
Especially because, well, with what Michaela said, we can assume that there's going to be a second season. So they're going to be proceeding
forward with this,
documenting this kind of stuff, and this kind of I mean there's a lot of fabricated drama on the show. It's obvious. It's reality TV.
It's unscripted, but it's still reality TV.
That kind of plot points will drive viewership.
Oh my God, it would be amazing.
The roof.
I would love it. I would absolutely love it. But I don't want the turmoil for them that would come with being excommunicated from the church that they want to be a part of.
Let me be clear. I don't believe that Nemo even wants to be excommunicated.
No, he doesn't.
Despite being probably the most vocally critical person in all of the UK of the church, I don't think that he wants to lose his membership. So
we don't want that for anybody who doesn't want that. But at the same time, if I was in their position, I would be concerned, because I think we're going to see some serious changes in Mormonism when Dallin takes the reins. And so I'm worried for them. I truly am. Like, if you want, it would be a stressor for me, because I know some of them have said like, oh, I'm not worried about it. Like, I don't know. The church was miffed enough by it to put out a statement. I think you're on kind of shaky ground, and I don't want you to be, but I think you might be. Okay, we're going to speed run some of the questions that you had on Instagram. Caffeine and alcohol are not okay according to the church, but ketamine is. My understanding is that the ketamine that the girls are talking about is administered therapeutically.
Absolutely. I don't imagine that they're doing any sort of
recreational
street
ketamine
drug. Yeah, and ketamine otherwise is not legal in Utah.
No, they couldn't get it recreationally.
Yeah. I don't think they would be admitting to that on camera.
No. But ketamine in a therapy context, there's nothing against that in the church handbook, so they're not doing anything wrong there.
It's kind of like with medical marijuana. It's using discretion. When you're using it recreationally, that's when you really change the definition of what the word of wisdom outlines.
Is swearing not a big deal?
I would say that it is a big deal for a lot of people. When Jordan and I were before we had left the church, we would never say fuck around each other. Ass, hell, and damn are all okay because it's in the Bible.
That's what his parents say anyway.
No, that's not what my parents say. That's what my former bishop's children would say.
Okay. Yeah.
But
it depends on the Mormons.
Yeah, it kind of depends, but generally it's frowned upon.
It's frowned upon.
I remember specifically Jeffrey R. Holland saying,
"No missionary can be unrepentant of sexual transgression or profane language or pornographic indulgence and then expect to challenge others to repent of those very things. You cannot do that."
That's the abridged version.
That's the abridged version. But that's why you hear things like shiz and
flip, elder.
Frick. Yeah. Like, that's why you hear those things. Is it typical for Mormons to have such big age gaps in relationships?
Big age gaps? No.
I would say not typical, but
it's pretty atypical in my opinion. Some age gaps. There are a lot of, and it's kind of gotten smaller over the years because previously you would have 19-year-olds only going on missions.
Yeah.
They get back when they're 21, and then they're kind of still interested in the same people they were when they left, who are freshly 18 or even younger sometimes. And some people still date their own age, but I've seen a lot of people who date younger.
I was gonna say it's not a typical thing. You're not gonna get shamed for it necessarily. Like if you follow the rules, if you do your covenants, if you go to the temple, like you're less likely to get that.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, it's not something that I ever came across in my circles anyway. Don't members have to wear garments faithfully to get a temple recommend?
It is part of the temple.
It's a question.
It's part of the questions. Your bishop and a member of the stake presidency who is above your bishop will ask you if you are wearing the garments as instructed in the temple when they give them to you.
Which is day and night for the rest of your life with very few exceptions.
Yep.
So yes. So does that mean that they lie during temple recommends? Sure.
Could be.
Yeah. Why are they all so rich? It's probably one of the most common questions that we've gotten.
Honestly, that's a great question because Mormonism has not always been extremely rich. The church is insanely wealthy beyond anything that you could imagine. Whatever figure you have in your head, it is definitely not big enough if you are not in the know. Biggest church in the United States by far.
Yeah.
In the world, probably only rivaled by the Catholic Church, but I don't think anybody else comes close.
Mormons are also very educated.
They are really big on education.
More education, you generally make more money.
Yeah, even though BYU in Provo is not accessible to everyone, they're kind of like a really competitive school. You are not paying a lot of money for tuition. So higher education is really accessible. If you don't make it into BYU Provo, there's BYU Idaho, which is also as accessible, if not even more, because they have tons of online courses and stuff like that. So higher ed is really popular. Dentistry is really popular.
Lots of Mormon dentists, lots of Mormon physicians, surgeons.
Yeah. BYU is actually going to be getting a medical school pretty soon here. So
the current prophet was a cardiothoracic surgeon.
Yeah. And a groundbreaking one, being the first surgeon to perform open heart surgery in all of history. So
you have lots of men in like very educated, high paying power positions. Like the prophet up and coming was a lawyer and was actually on the Utah Supreme Court. So I think they train you to be more educated, which means generally speaking, you have more job opportunities and higher paying job opportunities available to you. But there is a lot of generational wealth within Mormonism. Like families like Zac's. Like obviously you saw their house. Those people are loaded.
Huge.
Loaded. And so some of that stuff gets passed down, and all the church apostles and leaders, like it's common within Mormonism, the sentiment that like you can't be in church leadership if you're not rich, because like all the church leaders generally live in one very rich or two very rich areas in Utah, and they all live in McMansions with lots of money. And so when that's kind of your leadership, that kind of gets reflected downward, and like Nepo babies are big in Mormonism. Like everybody works for everybody's family. And so you eventually inherit that wealth. You work for daddy's company.
The luxurious and gaudy temples are built by Mormons.
Yep.
So the church is giving cash money to people who own contractors and material suppliers. They're looking for people who are Mormons and, working with them for these multi-million-dollar buildings, of which there are tons.
And privilege. Like, let's talk about, there are two very privileged dynamics happening. The majority of Mormon leaders, not all, but the majority of them are white, and the majority of them are men. And so there is privilege in being able to access jobs and opportunities as a white person in Utah. And everything about Utah is connections. Like, if you're connected to people, you can get a job anywhere. And especially, like, the church is notorious for having high-paying jobs for certain people and having really amazing benefits.
Yep.
Having a husband who did work at the church and being on their benefits for a while, they offer a lot of church-owned positions that people can work at with really excellent benefits that's really enticing to the people who work there. So I think there's a few different things happening and why Mormons are so rich.
We could spend like
we could go on about that forever. But I think those are the main things, and you're not crazy. It's true. Mormonism and wealth, generally speaking, for most people do go hand in hand. The last question I'll have us answer is your favorite, which you already touched on, but say more about who your favorite is.
My favorite was Macy. I thought that the whole show, she seemed very diplomatic. I am a firm believer that from the get-go, the whole thing about her getting a confession regarding Dakota, I think that was just for the plot. It doesn't make sense to me that she would hold on to this information and not vet the veracity of the information to drop it as a bomb, because it was what led up to the cliffhanger for the end of the season. So I think Macy was great. She had a lot of level-headed takes. She was not about the misogyny that Zac was exhibiting toward Jen. She was, I thought she was really cool. That's just me.
So I think right now I'm torn between Taylor and Demi at this point, because
I like Demi too. She's awesome.
I like Demi. I think I'm here for the person on the reality show who's willing to come out swinging. Like when I'm screaming at Whitney on my screen and being like, what the hell? And Demi is the one that goes up there and is like, no, this is bullshit. What are you doing? Like that, I can respect that so much more than somebody who, like, the people who are like, it's okay, Whitney, it's okay. Like, I can't get on board with that. Like, I think I can, and this is reality TV again. So, like, bear that in mind. I love my trash TV. But I think I'm torn between her and Taylor, because I also respect the fact that I think if I had experienced what Taylor experienced in regards to swinging, I think I would have run my ass off the internet and I would have never come back. Like, I truly don't think I would have been able to cope. And yes,
which is what Whitney should have done after she did that ICU
literally
video.
And I know I don't appreciate the domestic violence thing. It wasn't okay. It was not an okay thing. And she was very highly intoxicated. I'm not saying that justifies behavior at all. But what I do appreciate about Taylor is, especially in that situation and in others, she's willing to own up to her stuff. And she's not afraid to, like, be emotional about it. I've seen her get emotional in interviews and be authentic about the fact that it was like, yeah, like, I don't have any excuse for it.
Her lowest.
Like, it was
point.
Fucked up behavior. It wasn't okay. And even in the conversation that she had with Whitney, being like, I didn't know that. And if I had known that, I would have done things differently. And I didn't, like, I think you're hurt and I didn't want you to feel that way. And, like, I understand why you'd be upset. And, like, being able to own that, I think, is just a skill that is not utilized for a lot of people often. And I know she's not perfect. She's messy on her own. And I love her in a reality TV show sense. But I think there's something about her that I really appreciate, especially in terms of just being able to own the swinging thing and just, like, deal with all the shit that she gets from people over it and still, like, show up and be herself. Like, I can appreciate that. And the more she shares, like, I listened to some of the stuff that she talked about on Nick Vile's podcast the other day, and some of the stuff that was happening, especially in that swinging group, like, some of the things that she described, especially with, like, the affair she had, it was not consensual. It did not sound consensual. Like, when that happened, like, when she had sex with that other person, apparently, she was, like, belligerently drunk and intoxicated. And so for somebody, and she's like, I don't want to say it's sexual assault. Like, I think I wanted it. But, like, to not remember, to be belligerently drunk, and then to have the other person be able to drive to you and engage in that with you, like, there are many red flags there. There are many, many red flags there. And so I think this is somebody who has had the influence of Mormonism her entire life and is just trying to find her way and was probably taken advantage of in these situations. And then she was not the only one swinging, but damn did she take all the fucking hits for all you fucking cowards who would not come forward about your behavior after she got outed and not only thrown under the bus, but they, like, ran over her and backed over her like 30 different times, and y'all all sat there and were okay with it. Like, I get you're entitled to privacy to some degree, but if it was, like, this was her best friend that they were swinging with. If that was my best friend that was being out thrown under the bus, I wouldn't want to abandon my privacy that I was engaging in and things about my sex life publicly either. But if my best friend was getting thrown to the wolves and absolutely ripped to pieces, you bet your ass I would have been like, yep, it's me too. So if you're going to rip apart somebody, you're going to rip apart both of us. Because that's just fucked. Like, to not only lose, she got divorced because of it. She lost her best friend and all the other friends that were involved at the time. Like, it's just not fair, in my opinion. So I think she gets way too much flack, and I do have some baseline respect for her as a human being. Those are our favorites.
Yeah.
As of right now, season 1.
Just final thoughts. In summation, this is the kind of opportunities that we would like to see for people in the Mormon church, where it's not so rigid, it's not so toxic. And I mean, there's a lot of toxicity in the thing, but where people are like Taylor having a lot of issues per what the commandments of Mormonism are, and are still trying and are going. Somebody had left a comment on something and said, if these ladies were investigating the church, they would be welcomed with open arms with the struggles that they have. But because they are members, they are outcasts.
That's a really good point.
I can't remember who it was, but it was just so perfectly put. And whoever it was,
brilliant.
Come up in the comments. I give, that is not my idea, but we want to see that. We want a healthier Mormonism for people. And it's a long way off, honestly. After seeing this, it was a litmus test that said, yeah, we're not making a lot of progress right now.
No, we're not.
On that front. But my criticism of the show and of what is going on, there is a lot of kind of fighting patriarchy and misogyny and stuff. I'm not going to speak on whether that's making an impact on the greater church at large, or if it's just in their experiences. Honestly, I would hope that it would be. But
I don't know. The sentiment, I think there's something to be said for the sentiment in, like, we're talking about a well-formed mountain that is Mormonism that's been there for, like, hundreds of years and has well established the patriarchal and misogyny norms. And so when you have a group of women who are just, like, chipping away at the mountain for a period of time, I think everybody does it in their own way. I don't think they're coming out here as like crusaders of feminism or anything. But when you have women who are the breadwinners in their household and things, this might shift things socially for some progressive Mormons, or even some Mormons who are like watching this secretly. You know, I think there's something to be said for a shift there. I'm not in a boat where I'm going to shit on any form of feminism, because especially in Mormonism, when it's so fucking hard to come by,
That's fair.
I'm like, you know what? Do it. Because that feminism, like that form of feminism and defying the patriarchy, is going to appeal to some people and not to others. But these women didn't come out here saying like, I'm feminist crusader over here and this is my whole point. Like, they're just living their lives. And by doing so, they're also doing some things that defies the cultural norms of Mormonism. And I can respect that.
Yeah. And then my qualms with the show, which is what will get them the least amount of flack among other Mormons, is the lack of criticism of the absolutely abhorrent parts of Mormonism. The just downright sexual shame that happens, the abysmal cover-ups of sexual misconduct of leaders and people within the church, and sexual abuse among children and things like that is awful. The racist roots and the things about Mormonism that continue to be racist. The awful history of polygamy and how they were taking advantage of people in that capacity. And it's not so cutesy to be Mormon. And I hope that people aren't painting it as like, oh, it's just quirky, we just kind of do this stuff, because
it goes deeper than that.
There is so much deeper stuff about that. And we've talked about how Mormonism influences every aspect of your life and every little bit of your worldview, and essentially forms who you are in every way because of the rigid standards that are set forth. So we still have to be critical of the Mormon church and of its leaders. And unfortunately, when people are sticking up for its leaders, which they didn't do by any means, but they definitely weren't that critical of them. It's something that we have to bear in mind. Anyway, if you made it this far, you are lovely. We love you. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. I know we have a lot to say. We are anything but short-winded. So thank you. We appreciate you. It's always been the case. You already know the deal. If this is something that you'd like to see more of, you can hit the subscribe button over there. And if you'd like to continue to support us, right next to the subscribe button is the become a member button. It is the same as becoming a patron. You get bonus content and awesome things. And if you'd like to join us for our next watch party, and we're not just going to stop here, we're going to continue doing these watch parties, because there's other stuff that we're going to have to watch, especially coming up, that you're going to want to see. So I can't talk about it, but you want to see that. You can join, for those watch parties, you can join any tier. We have all the way down to $1, so that we can make it for everybody. But you can go over there. It supports the channel, helps us keep being able to do this. I strongly encourage you to, because when Jordan posts stuff, she posts like relevant stuff and interesting social commentary, and I'm usually posting shit about the cats. It's
true. We have a good balance.
So if you'd like to go follow us on Instagram, you can find us over there. We also post like clips and stuff over on TikTok. You can find us on both of those at Jordan and McKay. Links in the description. And then also we have an awesome, cool, fun Discord community, which is where we hold the watch parties. So if you are going to watch, you need to join the Discord. But if you want to join the Discord for other reasons, there's all kinds of conversational topics, all kinds of awesome people, ex-Mormons, never Mormons, people who are just having fun and talking about your unrelated stuff, but they all share a common interest in our channel. If you'd like to join, you can find the description for that in the description down below as well. Final shout out to our sponsor, Aura. They've been loving us lately, so we want to show them some love as well. To wrap it up, we love you. You're awesome. We've been having a good time. Enjoy your trash TV like
Thanks
we
for
have.
Almost 100K.
Yes, we are approaching. Please subscribe so we can hit that 100K mark, and then we're going to figure out what we're going to do. Maybe we'll dye my hair. Somebody suggested that, and I am kind of toying with the idea, honestly. But it would be black if I did that.
Oh my gosh.
No?
That's a lot of work. I would pick like a random color.
Okay.
Like that'll wash out eventually.
Anyway, we love you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.